All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Alexei. I'm the co-founder of Bob. And today I'm going to talk to you about the hybrid L2. So, fancy buzzword. So what the hell is that? And it actually all goes back to Bitcoin. Me personally, I've spent the last 10 years working on Bitcoin and figuring out ways to do more with it without trusting intermediaries. And the hybrid L2 is an approach where we believe we can finally get DeFi and innovation back into the Bitcoin ecosystem. So why do we care about Bitcoin? Bitcoin is bigger than everything else, by far, and it will remain so for the foreseeable future, and it has been since the start. And it has the least amount of DeFi. If you look at Ethereum's market cap and you compare it to the TVL that is deployed in DeFi on mainnet and L2s, it's a 30% ratio. Now, if you look at Bitcoin, we're at 0.1% at a much greater market cap, and that's what we think, and many others, you've probably seen the whole hype around Bitcoin L2s, that this is one of the biggest opportunities in crypto for the last decade. But why, to this date, has no single Bitcoin L2 really been able to take the market, gain traction? And the reason is that the technology wasn't ready, it was hard to use, and what has been happening is that there's been a massive gap between adoption of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has been spearheading mass adoption by far, and innovation of Ethereum. And what has been happening is that users, talent, and capital would get into Bitcoin and just flow through into the Ethereum ecosystem, leaving Bitcoin behind. Happened to a lot of my colleagues, happened to us. People start with Bitcoin and then they leave. And the reason why it is so difficult to build a Bitcoin layer 2 is that you need to solve three big challenges. First one being the obvious one, Bitcoin security and Bitcoin bridges. And we actually now finally have a solution for this. And I'll talk about this in a second. The key word here is BitVM. But there's two other things. It's about ecosystem and liquidity. You can build a good Bitcoin bridge, but if you live in isolation, there is no way to bridge stablecoins and other assets to your network. If you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the tooling, nobody is going to use your chain. You will struggle with adoption. You will never get to the point of actually building products. And that has happened to Bitcoin for the last decade. And this is why we propose a radically different approach. We propose to take the best of Ethereum and the best of Bitcoin and to combine them into a single network. And the vision for a hybrid layer 2 is to leverage the innovation that you get from Ethereum and the security and liquidity that you get in Bitcoin. And from a project's perspective, you just like for Bob, but also any dApps deploying, you'll use Ethereum to bootstrap. There's a powerful DeFi ecosystem, there's a massive network effect, there's liquidity, there's tooling, there's infrastructure. And then once you have launched, then you leverage Bitcoin to grow. Bitcoin's massive liquidity, the diverse global community that has been prepared to really build on Bitcoin, but has had no tools to do so. Because frankly speaking, the Lightning Network doesn't work. It's terrible UX. It will not get adopted any further. So how does it work? Well, this becomes possible with the advent of so-called BitVM. And in short, what this allows us to do, it allows us to do Arbitrum-like layer 2s, optimistic, fraud-proof-based systems on Bitcoin. And if we have time, I'll run you through the tech in 1 minute at the end. But the idea is you get Bitcoin security. You get a native bridge to Bitcoin that is secured by Bitcoin itself, just like any ETH rollup has a native bridge to Ethereum. But then you keep and you maintain the relationship with Ethereum as well, and you make sure that you have a native bridge between, in our case, Bob and ETH that is secured by Bitcoin. And this is going to get slightly technical. The way we do this is by making sure that Ethereum, instead of looking for fraud proofs that happen on Ethereum, the smart contract looks at Bitcoin. And because that's very easy to do, this has been built already in 2016. Ethereum can check what's going on Bitcoin cryptographically. It's very easy to do. And what you get is that the Ethereum smart contract, the bridge, just looks at Bitcoin and checks, oh, is everything all right with Bob? Has Bob finalized on Bitcoin? And if yes, then an ETH user can always get their Ethereum or ERC20 assets back. And what this gives us, it gives us, for the Bitcoin user, you can deposit your BTC, you can always get it out as long as Bitcoin is secure. And for the Ethereum user, you deposit your ETH and ERC20s and you can always get it out as long as Bitcoin is secure. And if there's one thing we can probably all agree here at this event, is that Bitcoin is secure. If Bitcoin breaks, we're all going home anyway. And the interesting thing about this design, it's not just about Bitcoin and Ethereum. Sure, this is 95% of the market. That's what we're focusing on right now. But this works for any other smart contract chain. Solana, Tron, Avalanche, Polkadot, anything that has smart contracts can easily verify Bitcoin. There's Bitcoin-like clients, they have been built on all of these chains. And what this ensures is that if you're an ETH user, Solana user, Tron user, you'll be able to deposit your assets into Bob, trade them against Bitcoin, USDT, USDC, but also ETH, Tron, Solana, all the other assets, and then withdraw each of these assets back to the layer 1, as long as Bitcoin is secure. And if you look at this image, you'll see parallels to exchanges. Exchanges work similarly. They take your assets, allow you to trade, and they can withdraw back to whatever layer 1 you want to go to. But you trust the exchange. And in this case, you don't trust us, you don't trust an exchange, you only trust that Bitcoin works. And that is why we believe with this design, we can achieve the real flippening. Namely, instead of Bitcoin being wrapped across different networks and being fragmented and controlled by centralized players, you'll have a native way to trade Bitcoin against any other asset under Bitcoin security. Now, what makes this possible is something called BitVM. BitVM is the single most important innovation on Bitcoin in the last decade. And what BitVM allows you to do is it allows you to create fraud proofs on Bitcoin. Now, the name is slightly misleading. It's not a virtual machine. It's not a new programming language. It's not smart contracts on Bitcoin. BitVM allows us to run any program and ensure that it's enforced by Bitcoin full nodes. So think Arbitrum, think any ETH layer 2 that does optimistic fraud proofs, rollups. That's what BitVM gives us for Bitcoin. You take any EVM, Solana VM, doesn't matter. You take an EMM, whatever you like, you plug this into BitVM, and then if something goes wrong, you can challenge on Bitcoin. And we've recently released together with Robin, who is the inventor of BitVM, and the credit goes to him for really creating this innovation, the new BitVM 2 and BitVM Bridge paper that really makes this practical. So it's very easy to ensure security of the execution, and we get a new type of bridge. A bridge where you no longer need a multisig or an honest majority, but a bridge that works as long as there's one honest node somewhere in the network, just like an Arbitrum or in the future an Optimism on Ethereum. As long as somebody does a challenge, your assets can never be stolen. And that is a zero-to-one innovation and something that we finally, after a decade of research, will see coming to Bitcoin next year. So, but it's not only about tech. It's also about combining the ecosystems and things that live on Bitcoin and on Ethereum. And one of these things is staking. And apart from BitVM and bridging, staking is also coming to Bitcoin. And with projects like Babylon and others, you'll be able to use Bitcoin, the asset, to secure networks. And what Bob has been doing is enabling users to stake their Bitcoin across all of these providers with just one click. And if you look at Ethereum, LSTs, LRTs, that's a multi-billion-dollar market. And now remember the first image on the slides, right, when we compare Bitcoin to Ethereum in terms of market size. Staking on Bitcoin is going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry by the end of next year. And what Bob allows you to do is to stake your Bitcoin with one click into dozens of different providers and strategies without having to deal with 10 different bridges or having to spend hours and hours clicking through different front ends. And the way it works is that we build this one-click staking aggregator. It uses, and now the buzzwords, it uses Bitcoin intents and cross-chain verification, right? And what we do is we work with some of the leading LST providers like Solve, Bedrock, Pell, Chakra, PumpBTC, Acre, YieldFi, that all build on Babylon or other providers of Bitcoin security. And then you can, with one click, deploy your Bitcoin into these LSTs and use them in Bob's growing DeFi ecosystem, indexes and lending to borrow against them, to mint a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin, while actually putting your Bitcoin to work. And why this is exciting is for all these LST projects, it makes the onboarding experience for users much simpler. Instead of having to do wrapping or having to first bridge the Bitcoin in, because they all work slightly different. For the user, it's one interface, one click, and you're good to go. And we've all been used to staking Ethereum, DOT, Cosmos, Solana with one click. Now you get this for Bitcoin. And then what we do is we work with wallets, institutional custody providers, staking aggregators, and of course we have our own portal to distribute this to the millions of Bitcoin holders that want to do something more with a Bitcoin. And we're happy to announce that we are launched this week, and we're gradually releasing more and more integrations, and we have a big ecosystem that is already live on Bob, including a dozen of top-tier LST providers, a growing DeFi ecosystem, backed by some of the best infrastructure in this space, including Kobo, WBTC, FBTC, Dynamic, TBTC, and we've revealed our first front-end partner that gets this into the hands of millions of users, namely stakingrewards.com, and there'll be much more to follow over the next couple of weeks. So, with that, check out Bob. We have over 100 projects already live, building on the intersection of Ethereum and Bitcoin. And now I can see that I have 3 more minutes left, so I'm going to do something. I'm going to annoy you all with a technical deep dive on how BitVM works. And this is hopefully the simplest explanation of this new concept, this new hype buzzword that you're going to hear. And hopefully it helps. Now, BitVM allows us to run any program on Bitcoin. And there's one thing that I also have to clarify. Many of us have thought that, no, Bitcoin does not have smart contracts because it's so limited in the scripting language. But that's not actually true. You can write any program in Bitcoin script. But the problem is, because Bitcoin script is so limited in the operation that it has, something that's 5 lines of code in Solidity could be 1,000 lines of code in Bitcoin script. And then the size of that program just does not fit into a block. And as we have showcased here, right, you have this massive large program, maybe a bridge program, that you could never run into a single, like fit into a Bitcoin transaction. So the first thing we do is we compress it using snarks. We take this, we pack it into a Gross16 prove and verifier system, which gives us a snark verifier for that program. Now that is 2 gigabytes, constant size, around the same, maybe we can get it smaller. Okay, so it's always around that size, that's pretty good. It's still way too big for Bitcoin. Bitcoin can do 4 megabyte blocks at most, not more. So what do we do now? Well, what we do is we split it up. Take that 2 gigabyte program and split it up into smaller 4 megabyte blocks. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Bitcoin, as you may know, Bitcoin can fit up to 4 megabytes of computation per block. You can make them smaller as well, but the maximum size of each of these sub-programs is 4 megabytes. Now, this is all off-chain, this is not on-chain. Basically, just preparing your program to be verified on Bitcoin. Now, you have the same program. If you run this, you just have split it up into smaller steps, but you'll get the same result. And between each program, we get like an intermediate result. So if you're like multiplying, you know, you just like think of like multiplication. And like each of these programs can be just adding 2 plus 2 plus 2, and then you get the intermediate result, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and whatever. Now, when we build a bridge with this, during the bridge-in or peg-in, as the Bitcoin maxis like to say, you commit as an operator. If I'm the bridge operator, I will tell people, and I commit to running this exact program on-chain. And when you want to get your Bitcoin out, I have to send you the Bitcoin from my own balance, and then I'll go and reclaim the Bitcoin from the deposits. And I have to showcase that I actually ran this program correctly. And if I did everything right, if you withdrew your assets onto Bitcoin, everything's fine, that we're done. But if something goes wrong, anyone in this room, anyone on Bitcoin, anyone in any network can challenge me doing a simple Bitcoin transaction. And then I have to reveal these intermediate results. So remember, if I'm doing multiplication, I have to show like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Now, if I cheated and if I try to steal your Bitcoin, one of these results will be wrong. Because otherwise, I can't steal, right? If I run the program correctly, that means you got your Bitcoin. If I'm stealing, this means I changed it. And let's say if in the second to last result, instead of 8, I say 9, well then anyone in the Bitcoin network can challenge me and show that I'm cheating by just running this specific program, this one step in a Bitcoin block. And we can do this, this can be done in a Bitcoin transaction, and this is how you show that I cheated and you prevent me from stealing Bitcoin. So the idea is very simple. Take a big program, compress it, split it up, and then to show that something was wrong and prevent theft, you just run one component on Bitcoin. This is very simple, and this will be live on Bitcoin mainnet probably next year, changing how we use Bitcoin and DeFi forever. Thank you so much, and if you want to check out the paper, it's there. Thanks, and see you around. Bye-bye.